Welcome to Muskegon Rising, a community service project of the Muskegon Rotary Club. Our purpose is to create lasting positive change. We've been doing that here since 1916. So, let's get started.
Hello, I'm Aaron McKee, your host for today's Muskegon Rising podcast. I'm here today with Chuck Canestraight from Port City Marine Services. Welcome, Chuck.
Hey, well, welcome, and thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you here. It's just an opportune time. It took us a while to get connected. I've seen you around town a ton, and just really some great history and some great potential future things that I look forward to hearing you talk about.
Well, absolutely. I'm excited to do that. It's my favorite thing to do as part of my job is to talk about what we do.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about what the current status of the proposed waterfront development in downtown Muskegon is, and what are some key milestones you think we need to achieve?
So 2024 was a big year for the effort. Strong coalition of folks from the city of Muskegon and Muskegon County, as well as the Chamber of Commerce and Watershed, and a large group of people assembling to try to find a way to make something that's extremely complex understandable for the public. So as we entered 2025, we've really hit the ground running. I had the opportunity to speak at Rotary and kind of unveiled to some folks what we think is the coalesce project that we have in front of us here. And the city manager, John Seifert, has been out through 3 public sessions now to collaborate with the public and listen to initial feedback with the problems or concerns they might see in a project that's quite complex. There's a lot of exchange, a lot of parties at the table that have to be agreeable to move something like this. So it's a good start to 2025. We like where we are.
Awesome. I had the opportunity to attend one of those listening sessions from Jonathan, and really a great presentation, showed what it could potentially look like and showed a lot to the city. When you said Rotary, and I was at that presentation. I had just gotten back from a cruise with my family, and I just remember so vividly you showed the images of all the movement of boats, and you kept zooming out across from Great Lakes to a little bit bigger, and then world, and the audience was just in awe. It's so amazing how you tell that story about the power of movement through water.
You know, when you think of goods and especially Great Lakes shipping, since that's my career, I tend to want to make sure I can keep it in perspective to where it relates to the rest of the world. And frankly, if you run it backwards pretty carefully, the world moves by water almost 11 billion tons annually of goods. All right, so that's the globe, right? And then you shrink that down and you look at the U.S. And so when you look at the U.S. economy, it moves about 2 billion tons of materials by water. So that would be our imports and exports of all goods, and this is all liquids and packaged goods and whatnot. So then you come to our pond system, if you will, our Great Lakes Inland Waterway system, and we move about 200 million tons of goods on the lake, predominantly driven by the steel industry. That's where history started in the Great Lakes for the most part. And so you look at the Port of Muskegon in Michigan, and you start looking at where our place is in global shipping. And Michigan ports do enjoy some export because of our natural resources, some stone and ores and whatnot, at about 35 million tons a year. So you're shrinking, right? And that was what I showed everyone. I did it the other way. I said, here's my day. I look at 1, 10, 100, and then I get outside the basin and start looking at tens of thousands of vessels around the world and the tons they move. The Port of Muskegon is important to that, though, importing over 1.25 million tons of material a year after the Cobb power generator was shut down. So for it to restore those tons, grow those tons, and replace those tons was important to its treatment within the port system and the how the Corps of Engineers funds the upkeep and the maintenance of those ports.
Awesome. It's amazing the amount of commerce that comes through boats.
It really is. 80% of the world's products move by boat. Just keep that in mind.
Wow. So We talked a little bit. The McKee family, you don't see their name a lot, but their involvement in the MART dock has truly influenced the direction of port activities or maritime in Muskegon and through the Great Lakes. Can you talk a little bit about their influence in Muskegon over the past few decades?
Yeah, sure, I could. And, it's, a few decades, expands into a century pretty quickly when you talk about it. In fact, we were fortunate to have had the century celebration of the parent company, Sam Products Corporation, this year, a 1924 founding. And a lot of that was based on initial maritime projects. And most importantly, the founders, the brothers Mark and Max McKee, were innovators in maritime in the Great Lakes. There's some of that story told in a recent publication of Know Your Ships. Know Your Ships Extra was a publication that was put out this year that included the entire history of maritime related to the McKee family, written by a young University of Michigan naval architectural student, Brendan Felkowski, and really well done. I had some interface with it from my 25 years of at the end of this century or whatnot, but jaw-dropping things I did show at Rotary as well, bringing old military transport vessels up and around through the river system prior to the seaway existing through Chicago. Chicago when it was a bustling city in the 50s and whatnot, dragging ships up here to convert them to larger ore haulers, to start expanding the technology, if you will, of lakers, of self-unloaders, and bringing larger quantities of ore and stone down to those steel plants. And all part of the big machine, if you will, the big industrial machine. So when we look at how those McKees and now the third generation McKees led by Max and his family, it's generally been from a supportive and confident historical role to lend its advice or thoughts into maritime and ports for that matter. Mart Dock's not much younger than the Sam Products at a 1933 construction, so it'll come up on a century soon.
That's truly amazing, 100 years. What do you think the primary economic benefits that the city of Muskegon can see from this downtown waterfront development as it takes place? The planning is going on. If it were to fully be implemented, what do you think the impact would be on local businesses and residents?
Yeah, so, let me take that backwards and deal with the most important thing first. And so this is my theory on what Muskegon gets out of their participation in this, is that the type of economy this could stimulate or continue to stimulate in the Port of Muskegon is important, because the type of jobs that don't require extensive post-high school studies or whatnot are real and in demand. And as part of our marine company, we run 5 integrated tug barges on the Great Lakes that are required to be crewed, if you will, with professional mariners. They're hard to find, but it's a very definite and attainable path for somebody to follow. And we'd like to see more of that happen locally. We have had school days where we've brought students down to try to tell them about that, but we'd like to take that further and show through this port activity and this maritime activity that we can help lead some of Muskegon's youth to that very well-paying profession. And again, without a heavy post-high school educational lift to attain that. So going backwards elsewhere, the obvious is that the quality of life in rethinking how the downtown connects and Muskegon Lake connects to its commercial retail center, that is its city downtown, is important here. If you go out to 3rd Street, stand up on the first roundabout outside the Froenthal and look down at the lake, it's pretty easy to envision how that can be different. You can go up in the newly constructed convention center and see that as well. Very blank canvas, very exciting to think about how that city could remarry itself to that important waterfront. And then, for the businesses and whatnot, it's the variance or the variable types of folks that we can bring to Muskegon, year-round employed folks and citizens of Muskegon, habitual visitors and whatnot, the fringe, the regional folks that want to get to that beautiful waterfront year-round, and those transients that might come via these very new and recreational cruise ships, like you referenced being on recently, right? It really is an interesting way for folks to see the Great Lakes. The write-ups about it, I think the industry is honing itself. It's deciding what size ships are correct and whatnot. I do see that being facilitated downtown and as part of this project as a neat connection. And but I think the most obvious is the growth of the tax base, right? I mean, let's face it. You don't want to sit still and take credit for what you have. You have to constantly be thinking about how to expand your local and regional economies, right? And I'd like to see that happen in a way that tax base and that public interface with the water happens downtown and all of those great things, including our western Muskegon Lake residential development. But I'd also like to look east and see a thriving historical port economy happening down there with its folks and its citizens, adding connectivity to Muskegon County and further. We're a major agricultural producer. If you look at what's happened in the last 25 to 30 years, containerized products have gone from about 100 million tons globally to somewhere to 2 billion tons a year. So we talked about 11 billion tons moving annually. 2 billion of that is now containerized. And so if you think of global food transfers and shipping and whatnot, you start hearing about themes of identity protection. And where was this grown? And how would I know when it's locked into its container that I'm getting what I want and not something modified or added to something that was in a contaminated zone and whatnot? We really owe it when we look at what it is that Michigan as an economy has to offer the globe, other than our autos, and that's always in a state of flux, right? Which way that's going. I think we can all remain pretty confident that if we can help Michigan ag take the next step in processing and preparing and packaging their goods, they can reach further out into the globe with it. And as the world gets more congested in our region and our Chicagoland gets more congested, what better than support our 40-some thousand farms in Michigan by giving them the best and most efficient, sustainable transportation option, right?
I love the focus on farmers. It's I know you're from the mid-Michigan area. I grew up in mid-Michigan and all cornfields and bean fields, but what you don't realize here in West Michigan is all the farming that happens in Ottawa, Oceana, Muskegon. All those counties have such a variety of produce and farming that goes on. It's a huge breadbasket.
Yeah, I have mentioned to folks, first of all, my father-in-law and brother-in-law still farm over in central Michigan outside of Williamston. And, it's interesting to me. It's turned into the larger scale farming, and you read about the plains and the thousands of acres and concentrated feed centers and whatnot. We hear more about that, I think, but what we lose sight of is the very nominal sized farms and the efforts in specialty farming in products and whatnot, in beans and sugar products, and then also the extraction and preparation and use of those prior to shipping. Now, the innovation in food preparation and packaging is pretty amazing. I mean, it's almost ready to be placed in your cook pots, if not right on the table, right? So I think that's it could give Michigan a leg up. And you look at the lanes that we're focused on. Muskegon is at either the end of a highway as you look at it, or just mid-highway, connecting to resources like our Illinois and Mississippi River system, which, through that containerization, eventually those shorelines will close in on that river system, and more goods inside the United States will be traded in a containered pattern, more so from just the coastlines being infiltrated by, the heavy rail systems bringing it in and out. And so as that continues to grow, we look for those lanes to support, our Michigan ag products, but also, construction material products and specialty handling methods for things that have become more environmentally sensitive. We don't want our kids breathing dust. Emissions are a big issue and whatnot. So we see a lot of creativity there. But most importantly, the century we talked about, we think of things out in very long terms, 15, 25, 35 years, especially if you build maritime equipment on the lakes, you have to think that long. It's how long it takes generally to have a capital return on those. So we have a very, very long-term vision here, but have seen this coming, have seen this potential coming, and we're glad to see it come together. I'm glad to be a part of it, frankly.
Really amazing. So the McKee family, your businesses, your conglomerate of businesses, have invested significantly in Muskegon. Can you talk about some of those key projects?
Yes. So, we hope to invest a lot more in Muskegon shortly. We've been in a 5 to 6 year pattern of permitting for our residential development out in West Muskegon. We'd like to take a former mining site and add more tax base and some very nice recreational maritime related housing capacities. A lot of housing, a lot of talk of housing in Muskegon. I like the spread of the types of housing. Mr. Rooks is with the Shaw Walker project. It's very, very a big lift, but innovative to think of using a feature like that. We have, Adelaide Point has gone in and has been talked about all over Michigan. A premier, high-end, maritime-focused housing and development, very nicely done. Harbor 31. So it's exciting for Muskegon, and it takes time for all that to digest. But when we think about where we'll invest with the Mart Dock proper in the future, maybe what that affords us is the ability to continue to let that meld, and we do the things that make sense to add to all of it. There's a lot of opportunity there, like I said, a blank slate. But I do want to note that while that's going on, we're big proponents of Muskegon Angels, the community foundation and whatnot. And as I've said, we don't generally, as a company, the McKee family or the companies in general, have kind of quietly participated in efforts like that to place resources in the community that seem like small change. When you look at each one individually, but when you add them up and you make sure it happens annually and whatnot, pretty important to the wider shareholders of our company to make sure that they continue to give back to Muskegon.
I couldn't agree more. The consistent giving just showcases the commitment. One-time gifts feel like almost a flash in the pan, and the McKee family has just been so consistent in this community in their giving and their passion for Muskegon. It's visible. All you have to do is look.
Yeah, even when you see it's not the circus, the carnival. When the carnival comes to town and they set it up in the middle of the mart, things like that are important. It's I notice, and I think Max tends to lean towards the children, the police, and those who are filling the important roles in fire and public services and whatnot. Pretty important.
It certainly is. 100 years, I can't imagine the challenges that your company has seen. What are the current economic challenges you face, and how do you think you'll overcome those?
Well, the one thing that we have the ability to do is sit pretty soundly on a pretty firm foundation. We aren't very aggressive in the things we do, but take maritime for instance. We're facing the same problems that most would probably face. People, dwindling service capacities as people age and retire, and we have probably not brought enough youth up through the food chain to fill those roles and whatnot. And the other thing is we as maybe a wider society, without diving too deep into philosophy, is that we have pretty short-term expectations right now, immediate expectations, and we just really don't act like that in what we do. We look out and stay committed to those things that have kept us where we've been for 100 years, and stay dedicated to those with the investment we make. With the expectation to kind of ride up and down with these cycles. But I will say that our focus is on people and on the youth, and the youth's families and whatnot. And if we could do our part locally to make households and more sustainable, if you will, from a household perspective, so that they then pay attention to their youth and help direct them into their paths and whatnot, we see that as the most important feature of sustaining an economy in Muskegon. We've got to make sure that every household has a direction and has a place in the economy, right? It's not just for one of us or another, it's for all of us.
The old analogy, higher water floats all boats. The pun is intended.
Thank you. And there's some pretty large boats out there, as you know, right?
Very big ones.
Right.
So what are the long-term plans for the MART dock specifically in this larger overall plan for the redevelopment of the waterfront?
Well, what we'd like to see, of course, there'll be a lot of opinions as to what could be accomplished there, as you can imagine. They're like belly buttons, right? I think that might be the clean phrase. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see a corridor from downtown that doesn't cause you to question whether you are invited there or belong there. It designed in a way that just it flows. It brings you there and says, "Come here," and you don't have to make that consideration. We'd certainly like to see some focus on maritime heritage. Right, we haven't talked about the LST or our other vessels in town, the Silversides or the Milwaukee Clipper, but maritime heritage is an important part of Muskegon. It existed during the dirtier industrial era. It can exist during the clean era, but it's important to note and provide some historical connectivity to the citizens when they do visit there. Is why is this relevant? Why has everyone made a big to-do of this and whatnot? Plus, if you haven't been in the LST, the interface with local and regional veterans and their historical goods from their time in the military is really something special to see. The Silverside's, a great feature. I will just say out loud, I just love the idea that if for some reason it made sense to bring all that together in a central wharf design, I think that would be really keen, really neat. But I understand there are, again, all kind of opinions out there. So we see 3rd Street and that 3rd Street slip accomplishing that. That inviting corridor, some maritime heritage and whatnot. Outdoor sit on the grass out in front of the historical auditorium. You'll see it in the rendering. A public venue, slide some doors open, and maybe the local dance groups or whatever anyone's working on locally could be performed in front of their families or whatnot. It doesn't have to be a big, to do. It could be a little to-dos every other weekend or something. But in order to make everyone that lives behind shoreline, feel like they're all lakefront citizens. It's a shoreline city, right?
That's awesome. I love the older building there. I think somebody called it an ice. Was it an ice arena?
Yeah, it was an ice auditorium.
Okay.
Max could tell you a lot about that. I don't know the name of the famous skater. I know there was some hockey games in there and whatnot, but I've had the structure looked at. I'm an engineering. I'm a civil engineer, and had a professional in there to look at that building, and we're pretty excited about the potential reuse for it. Yeah.
Really awesome. And I would imagine it was back in the day when the ice was natural.
Yeah.
So, cold building.
Well, remember, too, that it was one of the features of the Mart Dock was a 5-story cold storage. So we had an ammonia cooling system in it. And, there's a lot that's gone on in the Mart Docks. If the walls could talk, they say, right? A lot of goods move through that facility.
You mentioned something about youth, and there's labor shortages. I don't think I talked to an employer that doesn't have a labor shortage. Skilled trades, your industry is obviously post-high school, really not a degree required. How do you get into this? How did you get into working on the water?
So the interesting part is I'm the most motion sick person you could ever meet. And I got associated with shipping and boating, right? And so the path is pretty straightforward. If you take the time to get your papers filled out and you get your merchant marine document, you can start on the deck of a ship, and you're basically a laborer. So if you think about it, think about a plant or a factory, if you will. It's just stationary. The difference is the boat moves, right? So some of the features is that, you live and eat and have your recreation on the boat when you're out in the lake. Now, I will admit it's a lot nicer role in the Great Lakes because you're at a port every few days versus every few weeks if you're on the big ocean. But there's a lot of features of doing it on the Great Lakes that could make sense for somebody that wants to follow a role that could lead them to handling a boat, being a captain or an engineer down in the engine room. Most of our mariners, I talked to Captain Hogan, who heads up our marine operation, our hawse piper. They started as the basic laborer, the deckhand, if you will, and followed their superiors and learned. And we have great examples of folks who have very professional careers, and some local ones. The local family, the Haynes family. Father was a longtime captain for Andrew Marine. His son is now a Port City Marine captain, and at a pretty young age as well. So, yeah, there's examples of that. We also in our company we have the luxury of having different folks from the Muskegon area, and so know their family and their children and whatnot, and I think it's important to give them a reason to stay in Muskegon, work for something that comes back to Muskegon and whatnot, and be proud of their city and their county, right?
Absolutely, and I always find youth don't understand all the career opportunities that are available, and I think it's just very important to let them know this is a great opportunity. It's
a daunting task to get that message out through the school's counseling systems and whatnot. And frankly, the Marine one, I think, the word merchant marine, I read a small story recently that they were thinking about changing that because of the affiliation of military with Marine. And it's scaring parents, right? But we do have a military sea lift that's one of the most important part of our merchant marine system. It isn't all naval ships, and there is a lot of supply and things that go on that are important to national security as well, right? And even though the Great Lakes ships wouldn't be sequestered to leave to go do those things, we make most of the nation's steel in the existing blast furnaces through the Lakers that move all the commodity down to those plants. So I like to assume it will never have to be a big push for that kind of effort again. I hope that's the case, but I think it's important that they understand that they could take a role that took them out into the seas. They could take a role that kept them on the river system. They could pick a role that kept them on a dock, and realize that it's not something mysterious. They're very straightforward roles. They're somewhat industrial. Use your body. You get to see a lot of the world. You get to see either the Great Lakes or travels and whatnot. Just describing a starting role. Let me describe the role is that with these proper papers, you don't have to pay to be trained. You're fed and housed on the boat. You're being paid a very fair wage. Our starting wages, just for competitive reasons, I'll just say that they're more competitive, or they're higher paying than you'd find on land, and a better wage than our competition boats would pay. But in excess of mid-20s dollars an hour, and would generally result in a package, for just a beginning entry position of $70,000 or $80,000 a year, and that's a big deal. I mean, that's a big deal if you've been working 30 years and that job becomes available. It's just the youth tend to be the ones that can take and bear the lifestyle a little bit, right, before they've maybe settled down or decided exactly how things are going to look for them as an adult. And many find it lifelong careers once they started.
Interesting. So how can the public get involved in the discussions that are surrounding this whole development in partnership with all the different parties that are involved?
Wow, drop so many names and give them credit, right? I mean, the easy one and the important one, because it is the city of Muskegon that has to eventually consider this, right? It's got to go in front of the commission, and they've got to make that decision as to whether all of this that we've honed down to numerous property swaps and agreements and a lot of trust, things going on forward into the future and whatnot. They should go to the City of Muskegon website. They should look for the Connect Muskegon tab. That's, if I recall, it's off to the right. I want to remember the name. I think it was Deborah Sweet now that has put together the IT at the city or whatnot. It's doing I think just a fantastic job. I've seen other sites and whatnot, and I know there's some assistance that goes on through the city manager's team over there. Get there, and it has the current description. It has a great Q&A area to tell you about it. I'm not sure if there's renderings out there yet. Those have been shared. The Chamber of Commerce has shared those. They're concepts, right? I mean, they're all to be honed and whatnot, but I think the important thing is that you look at it holistically. You look at it and say, okay, in the short period, we're going to go ahead and unleash the potential quality of life expansion and access to this lakeshore and important things to the current citizens. And we're also going to make sure we're smartly looking out for this 25 to 50 year or more future connectivity into Michigan's agricultural and industrial products producers to stay relevant, connected in Michigan's economy. We don't want to be a one-trick economy in Muskegon and West Michigan here. We want to keep it diverse. And again, I'll beat the drum, but we want to make sure that there's a spot, a job for every one of the folks that want to live here.
I don't know Deborah's last name. I met her on Monday at the presentation that Jonathan did.
Sure.
She'll be also posting this podcast up there as soon as it goes live. She
great.
watches as well.
Great.
And it is really just I've said this in my role at the Chamber of Commerce, this is Muskegon's generational opportunity to build something for future generations.
Yeah.
And It is so important that we get it right and that all parties are involved. And I think the city and your companies and the county have really done a good job of providing what we think it'll look like. I always say architectural drawings are like a budget. They're your best guess, and they're guaranteed not to be that way.
Sure.
But I really appreciate your investment in our community. I appreciate you taking your time here. Is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't discussed for our listeners and viewers?
No, it's always a time when you get live and you get the podium and get to say something. You do shameless plugs and name drops and whatnot. But I'd like to thank the folks that have taken their time, and I believe a lot of their time has been, not just work related but personal. We have citizens, Steve Olson, a tremendous amount of time. Dave Alexander. Energetic Dave Alexander, thank you. I've known Dave now for over 20 years, maybe 25, and back from his reporting days and whatnot. Passionate about what goes on in Muskegon. Cindy Larson, and now with Rachel Gorman coming up into the role at the chamber. All great thinkers, not afraid to toss out or counter what we might see as ideal, right? And so I think it's been a great working group. The Verplank Dock Company, our partners in West Michigan port operators, have been very, very supportive of this. Of course, one of their parcels is an important facet of the exchange and whatnot. So I think that's it. Just to thank everyone that's interested in it, and frankly, having spent half my life thinking about it, it's a big deal to us. We think about it daily. So we see good things in 2025, and we remain open to conversation, both good and bad, if someone wants to talk about it.
Great. Thanks so much, Chuck. And for more information, portcitymarine.com as well. I know it's a quiet company in town, but you do so much great work. They can get out and check your website out.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Muskegon Rising and supporting the Muskegon Rotary Club. For more information, please visit muskegonrotary.org. If you think someone is doing something amazing in our community, please email us at muskegonrising@muskegonrotary.org.